Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet. This podcast focuses on the intersection of sales, leadership, and personal development. Now let's get ready to dig in and crush it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. I am super excited this week. I have another co-author from the Brilliant Breakthroughs for the Small Business Owner book series, and it's the book series I've been talking about for the past few months, the 4th annual international best-selling business series, and it comes out November 11th. And today's special guest is Shalini Nag, and she has her Ph.D. too, so I forgot to say doctor. But her chapter is called Flip the Paradigm, Embrace the Human Approach to Boost Your Business. And when I first read her chapter, I loved it and related to it so much because I have a corporate background. And even outside of corporate, I've worked with other companies. And now as a business consultant and coach, like all the things she talks about are so true and really going on still. So without further ado, welcome, Shalini. How are you?
I'm very well, Melinda, and so excited to be here today with you.
Awesome. Thank you. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit of your background and how you even got passionate about your niche and how you help people?
Happy to. So you just mentioned my doctorate. So it's a fun story because I am a scientist converted to a management consultant, converted to an entrepreneur. And today I work with business owners, entrepreneurs, as well as senior executives to create exceptional cultures and transform their people into exceptional professionals, because I believe that they're two sides of the same coin. And unless we address them both simultaneously, we're not really going to be able to impact business the way we want to. So that's where my focus is and where my passion lies, and making sure people are really happy at work and therefore doing their best work. And the reason I got into it is a pretty long journey. My first experience with this was really when I was doing my graduate studies. For a while, I was in a laboratory where I had a really good person as my boss, but a really terrible manager and leader, which meant that 4 years in, I couldn't really see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I didn't really know if I'd be able to finish my PhD. A bunch of different instances and incidents later, I ended up actually switching labs, moving to a different team. And 2 years later, I had peer-reviewed publications. I had submitted my thesis. I had started from scratch and basically finished all the work that I wasn't able to do in 4 years within 2 years and more. And so for me, that was like the first experience where I really thought about, hey, it's not just me who impacts my performance. And then as I went through my journey, you might recall this, I worked with almost 100 organizations by now. And as I went through my experience, what I realized is this is true of everybody. It's not just me, and the numbers and the research bears this out, that our performance depends not just on us, but who we work with, who we work for, and what kind of support we have with us in that environment.
Yes, so true. Yeah. And now you help people kind of push through that and realize if their culture is, I love how you say in the book, a command control model of leadership. I'm just quoting right from the book. You know, a command culture is what I feel like I see out there still. And it's really amazing that in this day and age that still exists. So
It's a legacy, you know, it has continued. I firmly believe, and unfortunately it lasts still, but it started with good intentions. When, you know, in the industrial age, when we think about it, we were first automating processes. Organizations had started becoming huge for the first time. You can imagine why that structure and process and hierarchy was very important in order to keep business going. Mm-hmm. The world has shifted since then. And now it's all about knowledge. It's all about creativity, adaptability, innovation. And now we need to tap into the creative wisdom of the people. And to do that, we really need to allow people to perform at their best to bring their ideas to their table, to bring their differences so we can have constructive conversations and generate new ideas. Unfortunately, because leaders have now been trained to be these very solid uh, people who have no vulnerabilities and who have to always have every answer, that command culture continues even today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And one of the things, it's interesting you said about the people, and one of the other things you said about the book is employees who feel they are heard are nearly 5 times more likely to perform their best work. So how does someone, if you're an employee, that person, start to work through that situation? How can they start to get their voices heard? Do you have any suggestions?
Yes. So again, I always talk about both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
So one example, and this is a caution for the manager or the leaders. So I was working with a client last year, and I had been hired to actually understand why their engagement scores in the organization were super low. But when I took the concerns of the people to the CEO, he actually responded to me with, if you just want to be a loudspeaker for the people, then I don't know what I've hired you for.
Wow. What did you
And,
say?
and my reaction was, well, if you don't want to hear them, then you don't really want to understand why their engagement scores are low.
Hey.
Because if you keep talking at them, that's not really going to help you. What you need to do is talk with them, and that's something you're not doing. And I think there is a huge impact of that. And we actually saw an impact of this kind of behavior in a different situation with another client. They had just changed leaders, and the new leader was my client, and they'd had a similar culture before. And the consequence of that was when they had their senior leadership team meetings, he would keep asking them, okay, what are the issues? Like my client would keep asking his people, what are the issues that you're having? Let's get together, talk about the issues and solve them as a team, because we have all the expertise we need right here. But they had been so used to the kind of client I just described that they were afraid to mention that there were any issues.
Yeah.
It took 3 months of him actually telling them that. And even then, this particular situation that I'm going to describe was actually precipitated by the fact that one of the initiatives was lagging so far behind that it would. I don't know if you were in corporate, so you probably remember the red, yellow, green traffic light way of describing how well an initiative is doing. And they were going to go into the red zone. And so finally, this person had the courage to bring up the issue. And when he did, what my client actually did was he stood up in that meeting and he started applauding.
Oh.
And he was like, finally, we have something interesting to talk about. And the sigh of relief in that room was palpable, because everybody had been so scared that there would be a negative consequence of saying that there was an issue, that they never raised any issues. But that was the turning point of the organization and the team actually getting together, not just to report out, but to actually figure things out and move business forward.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that your story just brought back floods of memories, because I have been in that situation so many times where you're just afraid to say anything. Like you're literally afraid. And, I think that leaders wonder, why is everyone so quiet? Like if everyone's in a meeting, why is it so quiet? And that's, definitely probably a huge factor. They're afraid to speak up. So kudos to that leader that you worked with who took the time, 3 months you said, of like breaking down those walls. Those are walls that people have built around themselves to protect themselves. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. I think the work that it takes to break down those walls, especially when there's history. And in this particular case, he had an advantage. He was new, so maybe people were a little bit more willing to accept and trust that when he said he wanted them to share issues, that he meant it, and that's why they were willing to, even at the 3-month mark, actually share it.
Mm-hmm.
But they were hesitant then too. They only waited until they could not hold it back any longer before they shared it. So if you imagine you are the leader and you're trying to change things, be prepared that the wall might take longer to break unless you do something very, very different and you have that open conversation. And I would say one of the biggest tips for leaders in situations like this where you're trying to shift the conversation, and it's very important right now because uh, for a lot of organizations, they've had this kind of culture before they went into virtual work. Now that they're working in disparate locations, a lot of the leaders feel like they want to support their people, but they don't really know how to ask the questions. And that's why this tip is so important. I would say don't ask, share. Talk about your challenges and express your vulnerability as the first step to building trust. When you ask for help, your people receive the permission to ask for help and to share what they are concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? That is amazing advice. And I remember years ago when I was at one of the very large companies that I was a buyer for, there was definitely team struggles. And I ended up working with somebody on the side as a mentor to try to move through them. The whole company was very challenging in general. Like there was lots of politics and passive aggressive behavior. And I didn't want to be one of those people. So I had to really get to that point. You're right, where it kind of breaks it down to where you're a human with them. Like you're all together as a team. It's not the me versus them culture. But the hard thing is, as I'm just thinking of another example, is someone who still operates in a command culture way and then tries to do a little bit of that on the side, because then it comes across as fake, right? So
Exactly.
There's a mix, there's a balance in a period of time of change if that person is really authentic about wanting to change. So there's a lot there. We could probably make a whole podcast series about that.
Yes, we absolutely could. And, it is a journey. It is a journey to get to the point where you build that trust brick by brick. You have to break down one wall and then build a new one, which is a stairwell or a bridge. Mm-hmm. So it takes time. It's a journey. But I love the experience that you were sharing there, because I think you had also asked what can the individuals do if they're in that situation. And I always recommend start with questions. And this works for leaders as well. But as an individual, when we are feeling disempowered or feeling like there is a certain fear around expressing our own opinion, I would say start with questions, and not start with questions that are accusatory. But, in my chapter, I talk about generative conversations. It's start with questions that are appreciative, that is, they add value, and they are inquiry based, so they're based out of curiosity. So when we are facing someone who maybe we don't agree with their perspective, or we think we are being given work that, for example, our plates are already full, right? And we know we have to work till 10 p.m. already, and this additional work is going to make us work till 12 a.m. or later. The question one can possibly ask is, how does this fit in with all these other things that I'm doing? Do we need to reprioritize? Because you're not saying no to a boss that you're afraid of. You're asking them to work with you in order to figure out how all of this actually helps move your work forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's such a good way to phrase it too. You're right. It doesn't come across as defensive or angry that you have too much on your plate. It's just calmly asking for help in a non-negative way. So I love that. You should do a whole, maybe you've done this before, a whole list of like different questions and conversation starters. Well, you have a little bit here, but yeah, you're so good at this, actually.
So here's the challenge with that. There are so many situations in human-to-human interactions in the workplace or outside. There is no way you can have a comprehensive dictionary of questions.
I was just thinking back to coaching class when I went to coaching school a couple years ago. They give you all these questions, and then we would have mock coaching sessions
Yes.
every week, several times, and the master coach would be on there to critique or give feedback, however you want to put it. Nothing negative, but just, to coach you along. And you're right, like you'd kind of be digging through the book to look for that perfect question,
So actually,
and it wasn't really there. So you're right.
so the thing is, what we can do and what I've done in my so I have this course that I do called Conversations for Business Success, where I teach not just generative conversations, but also strengths-based conversations, and my own proprietary model called Allies at Work, which is really about overcoming conflict in a very, I would say, innovative way. By building that human connection. There's a story behind there. If we have time, I'll share it.
Yeah.
But basically, in that I do actually do exactly the kind of exercises that you talk about. But what I say is, think about how you can use questions like, how do we do something together, right? How do we solve this problem together? When can we work this around? What new way can we think of? As long as you are using terms like that, you're framing it up in your own mind and in the mind of the listener as, how do you and I work together to solve this common problem? And as long as you're trying to get to that common goal area, you're in good shape.
Yeah. Wow. And you know what? I didn't know that you had that course. So that is divine timing and intervention with segue, right? That was like perfect. Yeah. Feel free to share the story. You can share more about that. I would love to hear more, actually.
So the story of Allies at Work actually began with me thinking back to how my mother used to negotiate or teach my brother and I to get along. And whenever we'd go to my mom and complain about something, saying, he did this or she did that, she'd say, you can't really clap with one hand.
Oh, I've never heard that before.
So it's a colloquialism in our part of India. There's actually a famous Oscar-winning movie maker called Satyajit Ray. He's, of course, long past, but his movies are brilliant children's movies and also social movies. And one of the children's movies has this in our native language, and the concept of that is so powerful because if there is a conflict, you both have a role to play because you can't clap with one hand.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Just like we would say, it takes two to tango.
Exactly.
So along the same lines in terms of
exactly along the same lines. And so the whole premise of Allies at Work is, how can we find the bigger picture where we both fit in? It's not you versus me under any circumstances.
Wow. I love that. Thank you. So is your course open as an evergreen, or do you have, how a lot of people do courses where they have release dates?
It's not evergreen yet. Right now, it is still in the phase where I do it on demand for companies internally.
Okay.
So they can reach out to me and we can plan it for their organization. I am actually planning a version that will be available evergreen virtually coming soon in the next few months.
Okay, cool. Well, if you wish, definitely give me that information for the show notes. So I would love to share that out because it sounds really fascinating and very helpful. So thank you. Awesome. Well, I like to close with one fun question, and I'm surprising you. So if it's just kind of like an off the cuff question. And that is, if you didn't have to sleep, so you had 8 more hours in your day, what would you do with that time?
I'd spend it calling all of my friends on the other side of the world, friends and family.
Oh, wow. No one's ever said that. That's amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome. I really would, because with the time zone differences, we only have so many hours to overlap. So that's one of the things that I always miss. I always have this long list of people I would like to chat with, and the timing is never quite right.
Oh, wow. No, that's great. That's amazing in regards to human connection and just shows the type of person you are. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
You're welcome, Melinda. What's the one fun thing you would do?
Oh, I would I probably get more work done. This is really not good. So bad. I would spend more time outside. I go on a power affirmation walk every morning. So I would love to be able to also like go to just like a local beach for a few hours. But I've tried to get better at scheduling those things. Like last week we went to the beach for the morning. But it's amazing. We live in the Keys and we don't do all the things. People always think I'm sitting under a palm tree drinking, a coconut drink, and I'm just not. So we're always doing something. So yeah, I would probably work a little more, like get a little more writing done, and then I would also probably split the time and spend like a couple more hours outside because I love to be outside. But yeah, and no one ever asked me that, so thanks. You flipped the question on me. You put me on this spot. That's great. I love it.
Well, I did say I'm all about curiosity and questions.
Yeah, and I am too. It's really funny that you said that because my sister and my dad tell me I'm nosy. They're like, "You're so nosy." And I'm like, "No, I'm just curious. Like I'm a curious person. I think it's good." So I'm glad you're curious too. You'd be my curious friend. So
if I could, I know we are getting to time, but if I could quickly add something because you said,
please. Yeah, I was going to ask if you had anything else you want to add, and then definitely share how people can get in touch with you. So floor is yours.
Absolutely. One of the best pieces of advice I've ever received from a random expert is see how you can make your weakness your biggest differentiator. So like your being nosy is your differentiator. Me being interested in everything a little bit is my differentiator because that's what makes me versatile and innovative. I'm able to connect the dots across all sorts of things.
Yeah.
So find a way to make your weakness your differentiator. And I think that works for everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I'm writing that down. Your weakness is your differentiator. That's a big word for Melinda today. Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. And that's what I say to my sister. I'm like, well, you're just jealous. So anytime she like rips on me, I'm just like, you're just jealous. Because I don't think of things like that as bad, right? Because we all have our unique talents and gifts and strengths. So I love that. I'm going to use that as my little quote for this podcast. So thank you for sharing. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. So how can people connect with you?
So I have my LinkedIn. It's the most active way. If you're interested in following my content, I'm guessing you're going to share the LinkedIn link in the show notes, Melinda.
Yes. And for everyone out there, she is really good on LinkedIn. So yeah, it's a good place.
And if you are interested in talking more about your specific business and how you can take the human approach, then my website has some information. It's www.evidasolve.com. That's EVIDASOLVE.com. It'll also be in the show notes, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah.
And you can always email me at my first name dot last name, so Shalini.Nag at evidasolve.com. It'll also be in the show notes.
Perfect. I love that. And I am so grateful that you took the time with me this morning, Shalini. I really appreciate that so much. And it's been really fun talking to you as always, which is why I wanted you on the podcast. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Melinda, for having me. And you're absolutely welcome to a great conversation on a Friday morning.
Yes. It's awesome. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.